If you clicked on this video, you probably remember the games from the early 2000s, the ones that got us all hooked. I'm talking games like Horseland and Neopets. You know the ones I'm talking about. These are the ones where your horses or your pets age and change through standard game time. There's an in-game economy that shifts based on the player community itself, and also your decisions, the things you did last week, still matter today. These are the games where a lot of us learned what HTML and CSS were and where we grew our love of online gaming and community. And for a lot of us, it's also where we experienced horse ownership for the first time. This is what's called a persistent browser-based game, and it's a genre that really quietly started shaping gaming and community on the internet long before modern live service MMO type games really took off. So let's talk about what that actually means and why these games are making a comeback. Before we get started though, let me introduce myself. My name is Mallory. I'm a software engineer, product developer, and a lifelong horse girl. I grew up playing and building this type of game, and I'm currently working on a project called Equuinity. It's a modern take on the genre that so far is one of the most robust and feature-complete games of its type. So if you're craving nostalgia or you just want to learn about what a persistent browser-based game really is, stick around. So let's start with a definition. At its core, a persistent browser-based game, aka a PBBG, is a game that runs inside of your browser, and it continues to exist and function and evolve even when you're not online. It's also something that is shared with players in a long-running, community-driven world. So instead of just everything resetting every time you log in, the world just carries on, regardless as to whether or not you're there. In the context of a horse game like Equuinity, this means that your horse doesn't pause or just stop existing when you close the window. It means for us, breeding season doesn't wait for you to log back in, it carries on. And your competitors don't stop training or entering shows just because you logged out for the day. So what does persistent really mean? And it's the keyword here. So in most games, you play a session, you log off, and the game basically freezes for you at whatever level or stage you're in. In a persistent game like Equuinity, it looks a bit different because time continues and the systems keep running. Other players will keep progressing regardless as to whether or not you're there. And this creates a completely different feeling. It's less like playing through a level and more like participating inside of a living, breathing system. That's why these games often feel much slower, but that also makes them much more strategic and meaningful because your choices aren't just moment to moment, day to day. They're actually things that impact your gameplay experience in the long term. So why browser-based? Originally, this was just about accessibility and ease of production. There's nothing to install or download. It was easier to make these games and players just logged into the website and played. But this also shapes the gameplay experience itself. These games weren't built for constant real-time input, so they have leaned heavily into things like strategy over reflexes and planning over reaction. You check in, you make decisions, and then you come back later and see how that impacts you. Part of this design direction means that these types of games aren't your traditional video game in the sense that we all think about today. You aren't necessarily playing a character or controlling your way around an open world, migrating through a map. These are games where you build and run a system based on your own preferences. I jokingly describe the style of game as a spreadsheet simulator with more visual elements and long-term strategy. And to be completely honest, a lot of Equuinity's players are actually using their own unique tracking spreadsheets to really optimize what they do inside of the game. So it really is a different style of gaming, and it has its own way of becoming very addictive. Most persistent browser games do tend to share a few core mechanics. So the first one is a time-based system. Things take place in real time or some subset of real time. So in Equuinity, we have our own game time system that equates one real life month essentially to a game year. And inside of that, there's different seasons for breeding. There's also different types of training and competing. There is building and horse life cycling, as well as growth that takes place. Another feature that's really common is economy and economic progression. So usually you'll see things like player-driven economies and long-term progression systems that really reward careful resource management and strategic thinking. The third feature is a multiplayer world. So yes, this isn't a real-time multiplayer like an MMO, but other players do exist and their actions will affect the world and how you interact with it. So in this case, competition and collaboration are both incredibly important to the success of not just your experience, but the game as a whole. The fourth thing to think about is this feature really I call check-in gameplay. This is something that works really well for a lot of us who are busy adults. It's really meant to be something you can check into, play for a little bit, and not be stuck in for hours straight, though I will admit many of our players are for their own reasons. But generally, how you play these is you log in, you make some decisions and complete your daily tasks, you log out, and then you come back later. The idea is that it fits into your day-to-day life instead of taking it over. So why do people love these games? Because they really do tend to attract a very specific kind of player. So these tend to be people who love systems, optimization, long-term progression, and strategic thinking, and building something slowly over time and building towards a goal. There's something really satisfying about the slow growth that this kind of game gives you. So for some people, that could mean raising a horse over multiple game years and training it to the top of its sport. But for others, it's building a really reputable competition or breeding program that's based on your own preferences or even the market as a whole, and watching your decisions compound and scale over time. The idea in whatever circumstance is that it isn't about instant gratification. So instead of chasing that dopamine high from an instant event, you're getting it instead from seeing your strategy and decision-making pay off gradually over time. So where do these games fit today? And it's no surprise that this is an older model. It's a legacy holdover from the early 2000s when the internet was really centered around siloed communities like forums and messaging groups. The really interesting thing, though, is that a lot of people are actually rediscovering this model and finding joy in it. I think it has a lot to do with nostalgia, but there's also a lot of elements of escapism here. Most players of this style of game, like myself, are older adults with careers, families, and really busy lives. And often we're just looking for something simple and gratifying to occupy parts of our day. A lot of us who grew up with these games miss the aspect of a unified online community, friendly competition, and the ability to flex our strategic thinking muscles in a way that doesn't require too many hours out of our day or too much of our brain power, which probably is used elsewhere. So this is exactly the kind of world we're trying to build with Equuinity. It's a living and evolving horse world where your decisions matter, long-term strategy is key, and you can shape your own game experience around an engaged, helpful, and honestly really fun community. Every single day, Equuinity gets more exciting. I listen to every single piece of player feedback, and more often than not, it ends up being brought into new or completely reworked features. While it isn't an easy game by any stretch of the imagination to learn or get used to, you can make it as complex or as challenging as you want, which makes the possibilities pretty much endless. You can specialize in high-level competition, breeding for a breed standard quality or performance, and even chase things like championships and awards. You don't even need to specialize. A lot of our players do a little bit of everything, and they still have a ton of fun. So if this sounds like your kind of game, you're probably going to feel right at home here. So make sure to check it out. And if you want to learn more about Equuinity, click the link in the description below. If you want to learn more about the development process, explore game concepts, and even learn how a modern software and infrastructure stack can be used to bring this nostalgia, make sure to subscribe to this channel and like this video.